have Betsy Delzer and Hoye here from Middleton-Cross Plains School District to present Awakened Justice, the intersection of mindfulness and racial justice. Betsy works as the coordinator of mindful education, a coaching position that supports staff, and Antonio works as a student, family, and community liaison. Please welcome Betsy and Antonio.
Hey everybody. How many of you were with me in the last, I held on to you, so good. It's always a good sign when we return. So we've just been practicing a little bit together in the last hour, so you are familiar with this practice of arrival. For those of you just coming to the space, welcome. We're really glad to be here, really glad to share this work with you, and we're going to begin with just a short practice of arriving in the space. So, those of you who experienced this in the last hour, you can co-teach with me just by modeling, adjusting your seat for comfort. And of course, this is completely optional. You can just watch, listen, daydream. It's all important. Right? And as we arrive, we just take a few deep breaths. Orienting ourselves in the day, this hour before lunch. Orienting ourselves in this month as it draws to an end. The beginning of a new week. And then just use a breath to check in. What brought you here? Simple as that.
I'll do my best not to use the microphone. Appreciate that. Honestly, this is the last year I've been working with her. This is one of the first times I've ever seen her use a microphone as well. So if I need to use it, let me know and I'll jump on it. But like one of the students that was here a second ago mentioned, Antonio Hoye from Middleton-Cross Plains area school district, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this morning. Fresh off the highway, it's off Interstate 90, probably 11 minutes ago. So, I asked you to bear with me as I kind of get myself going. So by the time we end, I'll probably just now be getting comfortable. So just kind of put it out there.
And I'm Betsy, and really we have to sort of give this cautionary statement that we are sharing with you in 45 minutes what we do with our staff over a 4-week period of time. So we've had this opportunity to give this sort of high-flying overview of the work in various capacities, different conferences, and are really glad to be here today. But there's always a part of me that feels a little apologetic as we begin because we're just taking very small bits of information and key ideas that we're bringing to you, probably for the main purpose of just your curiosity and hopefully giving you an idea of where you might want to go from here, right? Some things that you might want to consider from here, because we don't have the time that we need to really dig in and do this work around this intersection. Very, very important intersection. So Awakened Justice is our course. It's bookended with in-person experiences, and then there's 4 weeks of virtual content on the Buzz platform. So if any of you are familiar with that blended learning format, it's kind of how we've done this. And we're here today to share just these key ideas. So take a moment. I know it's a little bit difficult to see over here. This is really the purpose statement of our course. And I'll go ahead and read it since some people in the back, especially back corner, we walked in the room, we're like, oh, I hope everybody can see the screen. So let us know if you ever need help seeing the screen or if you do need us to use the mic. We have a vision for the liberation of our marginalized populations everywhere, and especially in the structures we are continuously building in education. Awareness practices enable us the capability and capacity to interrupt our habitual thought processes and biases, so we can untether from the system to which we subscribe, knowingly and unknowingly. We are committed to the intersection of awakening and justice in our schools. So this first part, we're really going to be thinking about mindfulness as a process. So if you were in my last session, we were talking about mindfulness and really talking about the modalities of practice. Practicing with breath awareness, body awareness, compassion practices to build and heighten our awareness. And here we're going to be thinking about mindfulness slightly differently. There's so many facets and ways to understand what this word is referring to. One of the things that we can think about is this three-step process: intention, attention, and action. So we're going to kind of move into those three categories and use those as the framework for where we're headed for this hour together, okay? So understanding in mindfulness and with this process, this is an idea that we know our intention of who we want to be and how we want to show up, right? And as it relates to this subject matter, we know we want to be change agents. We know we want to be the change. That's our intention. Our attention is how we pay attention to what is going on, what has happened, the story we've lived, the story we're living, and the chapters ahead of us, what we have power over. And that's our action. Right? That's our action. So our intention is to change. And we begin by using this idea of heightening our awareness, right? Whether it's of ourself, our breath, our body, how we're moving in the world, how our relationships are, how we're interacting with strangers and with loved ones. And we notice the thought processes. We start to name them, right? So we can notice what's happening when we meet a new face. When we go home and encounter a relationship we've been in for a while, we can notice the thought processes. We can name those things. We can name them by the names we know well. Irritation, judgment, delight. And then we can interrupt this process if it's something that does not resonate and align with the intention of how we want to be in the world. Right? Because some of what we are noticing is things that we've been conditioned to notice. And eventually, the hope is that through the practice of noticing, we activate change.
So, as you think about the intention, attention, and action, as you start to process that, I want you to think about your person now and possibly journeying back through time. Like talking to a younger version of yourself. That could be anywhere from yesterday, 5, 10, 20 years ago. And one of the things that I would like to share with you is kind of how I got to where I am standing here with you today. So, just in a roundabout way, I learned that I live with so many different ways to practice. And if you think about practice, it can be anywhere from yoga, meditation, your breath, or however you kind of regulate yourself, as I'll call it. Whatever you use to help you get through a moment, get through your day, whatever your body, whatever your mind needs to be at peace with itself. A little bit over a year ago, where this intersection happened was I was broken. Physically, literally broken. A knee injury that happened in front of 2,300 people. And it wasn't my first injury. It wasn't the first time I was going to have knee surgery. However, in the instant that it happened, I knew something had to be different. If I was going to be able to get back on my own 2 feet. If I was going to be able to get back standing. How was I going to repair myself? How was this going to happen? Luckily, I had just connected with Betsy, and we started a coaching cycle. Little did I know, a week before my injury, starting this coaching cycle with her, I was going to have that immediate impact of what she was teaching, or what she was helping me notice that was already inside of me. So that took me from the regular surgery, rehab, you know, the things you do when you're trying to overcome an injury. Like I said before, I knew the minute I went down that something else was going to help me get through. So when I started to focus more on my breath, focus more on where my mind would go when I would think that I would not get back to where I was before. I used to tell Betsy that, what do you mean different practices? It's like, she's like, well, trust me, you do them. I know you do. Just think, just feel. What are some things that you already do? I think, well, I'm really not sure, but okay, I'll trust her word for it. But when I started to realize that when I get in a moment where I didn't want to have a tough conversation with someone because I was afraid of what that conflict, conversational conflict, as I would call it, how that would leave me, I never wanted to leave a conversation with someone feeling unhappy about me as a person. So what I would end up doing is not having that conversation. Not saying what was needed to be said. Or walking into a space where I knew I was going to feel uncomfortable. But what I had the opportunity to do is embrace those moments. Is embrace those spaces. When I started to notice, when I would walk into a room, when I felt uncomfortable, whether my heart had a rapid beat to it, my hands started to feel all clammy and icky, as I would call it. My words would get stuck, not want to come out. Throughout my process of finding a different way for my body to heal, I ultimately found a way for my mind to heal. And as I continue this year-long journey of getting my health back, to where I can actually walk down a flight of stairs, walking here this late morning, I then started finding ways to help me heal. And when I say heal, I'm talking about moments where I was destroyed, I was hurt, because of structures and systems. So once again, as I started finding different ways to help my body physically heal, I started to be aware more of myself, more of my surroundings, and more of the situations and structures that was causing me hurt. Then that evolved to me figuring out that the same things that I go through as an adult, were some of the things I went through as a kid, and ultimately working in the education system. A lot of kids I work with, a lot of kids that I work with that look like me, a lot of kids I work with that don't look like me, all are still being damaged by these systems, by these structures. So as I started working through different practices, I began to then start teaching the kids, the students that I work with as well, to try to find and see where those moments were happening to where they were being harmed and hurt. And try to sit down and help them figure out how to process through those moments, how to make those times that they wanted to run and leave the space, to be able to stay, have knowledge, have understanding, have confidence, and believe that they have the right to be in that space and have the ability to navigate through and be able to walk out unharmed. So I would like to challenge you to try to put that all together as we move through this next piece.
So that story gives you a little bit of context of actually how the course itself developed, because once we realized that he was going to be out of school for several weeks, months, we started putting the coaching cycle into an online format. And so one of the things to understand is that we spend a great deal of time in the longer class really diving into what it looks like to establish these practices. And we got just a very small sampling of that in the last hour. But what does it look like? What does that mean? How do I incorporate it? Integrating into my daily, and then also dedicating time to establish this practice. So that's a piece of the class that we wanted to bring here in the sense of being able to practice together to build that skill set. And then there's a huge portion of the class where we're really talking about activating change, activating that intention and that action. So what we're going to do right now is a short practice that we have in the class. And it's really built by the words that Antonio just shared. Again, it's completely optional, but just for you to consider, you might want to adjust your seat again for comfort, knowing that this is an attention training practice. So you're drawing your attention to the words, to your physical surroundings and space. And after this practice, we'll be moving into some small conversations and really talking about this action piece. So for now, feel your feet on the ground or wherever they may be making contact. And on the slide it says the teacher within. We are firm believers that we have the wisdom in us. Part of our role as your guide is just to be the container for that. So without thinking about something that's caused you a great deal of stress, potentially, or harm or trauma, just think back to a time when you learned something of magnitude or greatness, some great lesson that sunk in. It might be a milestone, graduating, or an accomplishment. It might be from a great teacher in a loved one, a child, or a family member, or a dear friend. See, practicing our awareness and heightening our awareness sometimes means remembering, looking for the information. stitching that back in to where you are right now, today, where you are right now in your story. And we pause with that. Resource your breath just by using your attention to draw a longer inhale and a deeper exhale. And as we close the practice, just consider, sometimes our minds are spinning so fast it's difficult to find exactly what we need. But often, I'm a yoga teacher. I was practicing yoga with many of you this morning. I'll ask somebody at the beginning of the hour what they need. And I honestly believe we have it already. We just need to be reminded. So we'll close this practice by lifting the eyes, sitting with whatever comes up. Notice if it's comfortable or uncomfortable. It is what it is. You can be gentle with that process. So for this next piece, we're going to be moving into the action. We're going to be talking a little bit about some characteristics that we will likely be able to identify with. So I would like for you to take a look at the screen. And looking at the words, just consider them for a few moments, and just first glance only type. Okay, so perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, quantity over quality, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of conflict, individualism, progress is bigger, more, and right to comfort. So we're going to take a moment actually and just turn to the people around us, one or two people. You can have a small group conversation, but just what's coming up for you first glance only. We're going to give you some resources to understand the context of these words as we have these small conversations. So look for my hand in the air when I need your attention again, but just first glance only, what do these words kind of ring for you and mean to you just in this moment? But just another short instruction here, and then we're going to be working in our groups again. So first of all, thank you for your patience. I know they weren't connected, and it's easier when there's a handout that's stapled together, so thanks for your patience with that. We probably will have enough for you to have your own copy, should you be interested in taking this with you, but we wanted to make sure, so we just did small groups for now. And what we're going to have you do is just look at these explanations of these characteristics. And in your small groups, just sharing out around these words and continuing your conversations, that's awesome. But then additionally, what 2 to 3 do you identify with the most? What comes up, you're like, oh, that is definitely me. Are you all right? What 2 to 3 do you identify with most? And then, what are some of the thought traps? Right? What are some of the thought traps that go with that characteristic? So if it's perfectionism, right? In a recent conference that we were speaking at, there were a lot of perfectionists in the room apparently, and they gave us some ideas of the thought traps such as, go big or go home, like why do it if you don't do it right, that sort of thing. So think about the thought traps in addition to identifying with 2 to 3 of these characteristics. And this is time for you to share in conversation. Again, I'll get your attention by raising my hand in just a few moments. All right?
All right, So do we have anyone that would like to share or give some feedback as a part of the conversation that you already having? So that you could share in small groups around some of the words that are up and down, some of the thought traps that were listed for you. You know what? Before we go there, how many people in here by show of hands are educators? Most of you kind of educators, classroom teachers. Wow. I just say that because in being able to present truly right across the world, I do my best to try to stay out of the classroom setting all day long. So what I'm saying, I'm prepping you is that looking for share outs, and I would love the opportunity to kind of look at a group and try to, send somebody out to help share what's going on. Let's start doing that. But anyway, so truly, is there anyone that'd like to kind of share some of the thoughts or questions?
We kind of talked about how these can be just part of like your personality, but some of them are harder to deal with in the workplace than in your personal. So like, I am a power hoarder for sure. That doesn't really affect me most of the time, but at work it does, and it's something that I'm working on. Or like the fear of conflict, like outside of work, we're fine with that, but at work it makes it harder. Does that make sense?
Thank you. And you see, I kind of mentioned earlier, myself, a fear of conflict as well. So appreciate it. Anyone else? Thank you.
We were just talking about quantity over quality at work, and as being a specialist, as we're called, in art. Sometimes because we're not measurable on a test, that we're not as valued sometimes. And I think for talking about quality and not so much quantity, like I feel I teach quality about what they're doing, how they're being in the classroom. Are they able to solve problems, find things, do these things to be more mindful than worrying about so much of the quality that you would have to put. So trying to making them ready for the future.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm a school psychologist, and I feel the sense of urgency one really played a part. Anyone in special ed or in school psych, you have to do evaluations and you have timelines, and you want to make a thoughtful decision, and you want to consider all things, but you're also being asked, can you go faster, can you do this, and you just have to check things off when it comes down to it. So that sense of urgency is almost pushed on you as part of your job requirement, is to always have a sense of urgency, even though it's not always the best route.
Almost like that race against time.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much that kind of helped funnel us to that point of being more reactive and proactive. Are you?
So as I was looking at this list, I kind of noticed that at one point in time, I probably touched on one of those in my, in everything that I do. But I also noticed that these are some of the things that get in the way of relationships, that get in the way of making connection with people.
Yes.
Because thinking like a social worker, if all learning takes place within the context of relationship, and one of these things shows up in my relationship, then that creates a barrier. And it doesn't mean that I'm not having, it doesn't mean that we don't have a relationship, it just means we have a bad one. But how that affects the way that I make connection and creating a space where that individual can freely express how they feel, and then my stuff comes up, and then their stuff comes up, and then yada, 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 and everything goes on.
So how do you stay within the boundaries of being true, open, and just real, and that relationships build and form and grow if you have one or some of these that comes up as that barrier, right? So how do you do that? Like that.
Oh, I think you own it. I was going to say that. I think if you're aware that you have those things, it's easier to explain to others. Like, she's like, I'm a power owner, so I'm like, if I need something done, I can go to her.
So going back to that awareness piece.
Yeah.
So speaking of awareness, I know we're coming down to about 5 minutes left together. And I'm going to use this opportunity to give a shout out to Coach Rob, who just spoke. He is speaking next in this room. So if you want to stay and learn more, because clearly his wisdom, this is what we were talking about, right? We're the containers for the wisdom that's already in the room. And he beautifully set up the explanation of these characteristics in this idea that connection is where it is. It is what life is. And these create barriers. Now, is anybody familiar with where these characteristics are coming from, or the source or resource that we're using in drawing from these characteristics?
These characteristics?
Yes.
I think it comes from our socialization, where we were in sixth grade, where we were when we were at home. What are the rules of the social structure at home? What are the rules of the social structure when we're out in our community? Does it look like what happens to us when we're in school? So all of these places have these different rules that tell us this is how we're supposed to respond. And so at some given time, it's going to come into conflict. And if they do, then that means we're stuck with dealing with that conflict on our own. How do we unravel that when we go into these different spaces?
Perfect. No, that's amazing. It's perfect. Did you notice I used that word, perfectionism? Okay. So no, that was incredible and insightful. So these are characteristics that some researchers have come to understand are characteristics of our culture, specifically of the water we swim in, or as Coach Rob said, where we were baked, right? These are the characteristics of white supremacy culture. And we understand white supremacy through the pyramid of white supremacy, where you can think about genocide and violence, but at the bottom of the pyramid of understanding white supremacy culture is indifference and minimization, turning the cheek and looking the other way. So what we're really trying to understand is that these characteristics, and this comes from Dismantling Racism. It's a workbook by Tema Okun and a lot of other contributors, and there's a course online and a web book that you can check out. I put the link in the excerpts that are handed out to you. But we look at these characteristics so that we can understand where we are trapped. And the action that you have is to counter that. Right? The tapes that are playing, we counter tape. We interrupt. Because when we notice, this is the perfectionism in me. This is the sense of urgency. Again, we're rushing through this meeting and we're not getting everything done. I've got to put more on the wall to make sure that they know that my work is important. These are the characteristics of white supremacy culture. And one of the things that we talk about very openly in our district, albeit oftentimes with a variety of responses, is how to dismantle this culture, because we want to activate change. And we're all swimming in this water, historically and present day. So for me, sometimes it's meaningless anymore to come do a mindfulness 101 unless I talk about how I'm utilizing my mindfulness to interrupt my thought patterns and change. To notice what's happening and activate change. So from here, the work that you have ahead of you, the work that we charge you with, the work that we charge all of our classes with, and he mentioned across the world, we were able to go to Belgium and share this work with the International Institute of Restorative Practices. Because this is the heart. The connection is the heart. The barrier is the structure between us, and we know that it's fractured. So the work you have is to find the practices that counter these characteristics that we can identify with. Is it a compassion practice? Is it an awareness practice of breath and of your body? Whatever it may be, take the practice and move it toward change. Thanks for having us, everybody.